Unfortunately, I have to start this video with a content warning. Today, I'm going to be talking about Graham Platner and all the baggage that comes with Graham Platner. So, sexual assault and war and death and other bad stuff. I've only made one other video about Graham Platner back in mid-November of 2025. He has been in the news quite a bit since then, but it turns out, I think I did a pretty good job in the original video covering all of the bases. So I didn't think it was necessary until now. Let me catch you up in case you missed everything until this moment. Last year, Graham Platner launched his campaign to win one of Maine's Senate seats for the Democrats. It's an important seat. It could shift control of the Senate to the Dems. Platner is a former Marine who had a fairly progressive platform, like championing Medicare for all, criticizing U.S. aid to Israel, etc. So a lot of progressives were very excited to support him. And then his opposition went to work. First, someone exposed his Reddit account where a few years ago he blamed women for being raped and said that he wished he had been able to fight the Indians back when the United States was genociding Native Americans instead of the pointless wars he had to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. By had to fight, he volunteered to fight them several times over. Platner apologized for those Reddit posts, and then his opposition revealed he has an actual Nazi tattoo on his chest, which he got 19 years ago to celebrate fighting as a Marine in Fallujah. Instead of apologizing for the Nazi tattoo, Platner made up the completely ridiculous story that he had no idea the tattoo was a very famous Nazi symbol. And it was on his chest for 19 years. Instead of criticizing this really obvious lie, among others he would tell, and calling on Platner to step down and support a different progressive candidate 6 months before the primary, many prominent leftists repeated his lies and continued to promote Platner to their audiences. In that original video, I specifically called out Majority Report and Ryan Grimm, but I've also noted, Hassan Piker, Kyle Kulinski, the Young Turks, and many other commentators that continued to support him. Anyway, here's how I wrapped up that video.
My own personal opinion is that he probably figured out what it was several years ago, but was also like, well, it's not like I can justify this to me, speaking to himself, and anybody who knows me knows I'm not a Nazi. So am I really going to go and pay for this thing to get all screwed up? That's my guess.
So you agree? You agree that Graham Platner is probably lying about not knowing he had a Nazi tattoo? Sam comes to the same conclusion I did, but he doesn't go the extra mile, the extra 12 inches, to wonder what it means to support a politician who lies that easily about a Nazi tattoo. He knew he had a Nazi tattoo. He knew he would face no consequences for it. And then he lied about it when he was finally facing consequences. That's your guy? Again, do I think Platner is a Nazi, an anti-Semite? Honestly, I don't know. I don't think so. I do know that he is a walking PR disaster, and platforming him removes prominent leftists' ability to rightfully call out anti-Semitic dog whistles and outright fascist bullhorns on the right. If Platner actually cared about advancing progressive policies and ending the genocide, the election's a year away. He can take all of that funding he has and hand it over to someone who's just as committed to pushing the Democrats to the left, but who hasn't branded themselves with anything representing a genocide. Or, my God, at least someone who can apologize if they did. That's where the bar is. The bar is in hell, and we are still tripping over it. In the months since then, Platner was revealed to have been cheating on his wife with multiple women, and then several women accused him of being a heavy drinker who doesn't respect women. One woman said that while they were dating, Platner would often grab her hard enough to leave marks on her shoulders, and once he twisted her arm behind her back in order to shove her into a bedroom during an argument and held the door closed so that she was unable to leave the bedroom until the next morning. Shortly thereafter, after the New York Times published that piece, Platner won his primary to become the Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine, getting loads of endorsements from high-ranking politicians like Ro Khanna and organizations like Planned Parenthood. Finally, this week, Politico revealed that one woman named Jenny Rassicot has accused Platner of violently raping her in 2021. They were in a casual relationship, they lived apart, and one night Platner wanted to come over, and she texted him to say she did not want company that night. Regardless, she says that he entered her unlocked rural home and grabbed her over her continued objections, followed her when she tried to escape into her bedroom, and then he raped her, ejaculating inside her without using a condom. Absolutely horrific. But if you can believe it, this entire story is actually so much worse, which is why I'm finally making a follow-up video. Not to crow that I was right, that Platner was a lying piece of shit who would be a dream candidate for Republicans to attack and expose, but because we need to shame the so-called progressives who continued to champion this man through every single red flag moment until now. They mocked people for caring about Platner's continued military service and his mercenary work when he signed up after he finished several tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. They mocked people for caring about the Reddit posts where he brags about his military service and makes some truly horrific remarks. They mocked people for caring about the sexting, and they even mocked people for caring about the alleged physical abuse of the girlfriend in the New York Times piece last month. How did they explain away that one? Simple. Bitches be lying. It's a classic for a reason, because whether you're a diehard conservative or a supposedly progressive leftist, it will work on much of your audience. In this case, Lindsay Fifield, the woman who accused Platner of physically abusing her, who dated him for 2 years and wrote in her diary that he was the most toxic, literally abusive man on earth who destroyed my life, she's a Republican. She worked briefly on Nikki Haley's 2024 presidential campaign and says she hasn't been involved in professional politics since, but Platner's campaign put out the messaging in that very New York Times piece. Let's be very clear. This is a lifelong GOP operative who's dedicated her career to electing Republicans. Progressive media got that message, unfortunately, which I'll show you in a minute, but one more thing you need to know. Shortly after that New York Times piece came out, Fifield complained on social media that they had made her think that there would be at least one other woman on the record saying that Platner had sexually assaulted her, which of course would have then lent credence to her own story and also would have meant that she wouldn't be the focus of the article. She was shocked to see that she was the only named woman alleging that he got physical with her. All right. Did you get all that? Great. Now watch Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland discussing the story on the Majority Report.
Relationship, and then 3 years up, like, this is a great guy. Like, that's actually
right.
Like,
the ones who were in a Republican operative, and I have to
Emma,
just
please go, because you've been like
I've been on top of this. Okay, this is. I as a woman, I'll use that card now. I take claims like this incredibly seriously, but I'm also quite supportive, of course, of Graham Platner's candidacy, especially when we're talking about Susan Collins, okay? But also because his politics are politics that I largely disagree with, or agree with. In the Times, this is just unheard of to me. Here, I'll just read this quote. Mr. Platner strongly disputes any claims of physical intimidation or altercations, his campaign said. The Times could not independently corroborate Miss Fifield's account of the altercations. Now, that's what a tabloid would do. The New York Times is supposed to be able to corroborate claims before they publish a piece with her one-sided claim about his treatment of her, especially when we find out who this individual is. She is a longtime Republican operative. The only woman who's accusing him of anything physical at all, which is intense grabbing, hard enough to leave marks is what she said, and also locking her in a room when they were in the middle of an argument. She felt intimidated by him. And the Times, as I just read, could not independently corroborate it based on what they found, and yet they still printed it anyway. And I just have to say one more thing,
because I actually think that they rewrote the story, and it'd be good if we could get the more recent version, because they've actually strengthened the assertion that they could not corroborate it. They've actually reworded it to make it more clear than in the original story, that this is something that we have one person saying it, and there's no other evidence that we can.
Okay, Matt's pulling that up now, but I have to put this out there because this is really important. This isn't just us because we like Platner's candidacy and we support his candidacy on this front. I've been told from a longtime New York Times reporter yesterday who gave me permission to share this, that many others at the Times, including this person who I spoke with, have said that this, and they know internally that this is a gross hit piece and beneath their reporting standards. And to hear that from somebody who's a longtime New York Times reporter and say that their colleagues also are in agreement on this, I think says everything.
Then wait, where are the stories from the other women? Where are their accusations of sexual assault? Why am I the focus? Why are there 11 paragraphs dedicated to detailing my work history?
Which is hilarious because it was such a footnote in the story. It obscures the true nature of her collaboration with Republican operatives and her work in Republican politics. And she's asking, where are their accusations of sexual assault? I don't know, girlfriend.
Yeah, they probably just wanted to embarrass themselves by leaving those out, like as if they actually existed. Like, what is she talking about? Why would the Times do this?
Yes.
Well, I mean, listen, if she is suggesting that they lied to her and said that there's 3 other women who will claim sexual assault, you should come in here, she should out them for that.
And here's Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk.
All right, y'all, let me walk you through the absolute worst smear campaign of all time and how it backfired spectacularly in a way that may be the biggest failure of a hit job of all time, quite literally, okay? So first, let me start with this, a little breakdown of exactly what happened here with the attack on Graham Platner from the New York Times, from the Israel lobby, okay? To recap, Dem and Rep operatives spent the week setting the narrative that Graham Platner is a predator. Pro-Israel New York Times runs a story on Graham Platner, done by a pro-Israel reporter, literally. She got an APAC award in college, by the way, okay? No SA allegations, none. They talked to 6 exes, 3 say he was fine, 2 of the remainder say he drank and womanized. The last is a conservative activist who protected Brett Kavanaugh, literally worked for the Heritage Foundation. That's the Project 2025 people, okay? Republican insider who on the record said she wants to campaign for Collins and attacks Graham Platner with all these absurd claims, quite frankly. Okay, they continue here. She claims Platner trapped her in a room. The New York Times reads her diaries, texts, Google chats, and Facebook messages. Nothing corroborates her story. That's an important point. So 0 evidence. Republican operative attacking a Democrat who's leading to take a Republican seat. 0 evidence for any of the claims. Okay, more. New York Times finds a text from the accuser saying she, quote, would personally campaign for Susan Collins. This is the most obvious Zionist smear campaign in history. The GOP attack on Platner failed. What are you, fucking stupid? How desperate are these people? No, what happened was, and I actually know from some behind-the-scenes sources who were close to this, what happened was you had this pro-Israel reporter who was desperate to take down Graham Platner. By the way, the same so-called reporter also did a number of hit jobs on Zoran Mamdani. That should tell you something, okay? So this person was steering the story, told this Republican operative that, oh yeah, no, we have like a bunch of people and they're making SA allegations against him, so we should definitely put yours in there and you tell us your story and we'll put that in there. And so they overpromised and underdelivered. There were no SA allegations. They never existed. It's bullshit. They literally ran with allegations that had 0 evidence from a Republican hack. If they had any fucking whispers of SA, they would have had them bitches front and center and the headline would have said, Graham Platner accused of sexual assault. This is all I need to see to know she's a lying hack with a very clear political move. And all the Republicans are sitting there and they're turning into the woke 1.0 ones who are like, believe all women? Even pro-Kavanaugh Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 activists who are professional liars who have a history of lying? I thought you guys wanted to believe all women. And Democrats are there like, fuck you, suck my nuts from the back. She's a lying bitch. Own it. It's a fact. Everybody knows it.
So Fifield is an awful conservative who supported awful people, including actual rapists like Brett Kavanaugh. I certainly won't argue against that, but I also don't think that a person like that can't be assaulted by a boyfriend, especially the kind of boyfriend who would date a person like that. For some reason, her conservative history is damning for her claims, but not at all damning for Graham Platner, who chose to date her for 2 years. Okay. But no, that was enough for these progressives to say that she's definitely lying and Graham Platner is telling the truth, that he did not do that. Okay, are you ready for the most heartbreaking part? Fifield was telling the truth that the New York Times had another woman who was assaulted by Graham Platner. That woman was Jenny Rassicot, who backed down from telling her story to the New York Times, in part because of the moral conflict that she had between supporting Platner's politics but not supporting him as a person. She appears in the New York Times article to say that Platner came to her house uninvited, but she declined to elaborate on what happened next, other than to say it was enough for her to end the relationship because he was reckless and unsettling. But then she saw the liberal and leftist media completely tearing Fifield to pieces. These disgusting assholes confidently pushed out video after video after video, calling this woman a lying bitch and a paid shill who could never bring down the progressive champion that is Graham Platner, to the point that they forced a rape victim to step into the spotlight against her will. Rassicot said she later felt compelled to go public about her experience because the reaction to the Times story was dominated by controversy about another woman, Lindsay Fifield, who alleged Platner mistreated her and faced attacks because of her ties to the Republican Party. My part of the story was just a read-over, Rassicot said in an interview, and the story was Lindsay and the accusations of her being politically motivated. The absolute irony of these commentators going after Fifield for supporting Kavanaugh when they are doing the exact same thing to her. They supported a gigantic piece of shit man to the point that a rape victim had to step up to try to stop her abuser from gaining immense political power. Incredibly, it appears that Rassicot is finally a perfect enough victim for these commentators. She's not a civilian in Iraq or Afghanistan. She's a registered Democrat, not a Republican op. And she told enough people that Platner raped her that most everyone has finally given up on Platner. Oh, not everyone, though. Cenk Uygur, for instance, of the Young Turks, still going with bitches be lying. But here's Kyle Kulinski reporting on the Politico story.
There's a few things about this that are extra concerning. The previous allegations were easy to dismiss because it was a literal Heritage Foundation Republican insider who was making the allegations. Also, the allegations were effectively, he's a bad boyfriend. This is not that. This is a much more extreme allegation is point number one. Point number two is she does have some corroborating evidence. And it's also, if we're being serious here, a Democrat who's making the allegation. But let me also just say real quick, if you're a Republican, I am not remotely interested in your Platner take. Because you have nominated a guy 3 times who was accused of much worse and much more than Graham Platner. You can shut the fuck up. That's point number one. Point number two is, if you are Neera Tanden, shut the fuck up. She's going after Platner now as well. You worked for Bill Clinton. You worked for fucking Bill Clinton, okay? Final thing is, we'll know the country is in a better place when people react with the same sort of moral outrage and condemnation to arming and funding genocide as they're reacting to this.
No apology, no introspection, just whataboutism. Point 1, what about Republicans? What about Donald Trump? Point 2, what about Bill Clinton? Point 3, what about the genocide? Hey, Kyle, what about you bullying a victim of domestic violence and calling her a lying bitch with zero evidence? What about you forcing a rape victim to out herself in order to combat your misogynistic misinformation? And what about the fact that you can't even call it rape? You have to say grape like a fucking child because you don't want YouTube to demonetize your video where you finally admit that, okay, Platner sucks. And here's Emma Vigeland's take, which at least is closer to an apology than Kyle's.
Platner and perhaps the campaign itself has violated the trust of many supporters. I would include myself in that. However, obviously, I do feel a responsibility as a woman that, perhaps, I don't know, I'm still thinking about this, but I believe in redemption and restorative justice, and that is what had driven me to support Platner despite some of his past. But when we're talking about forcible rape and sexual assault, obviously, there is no excuse. And immediately once I read the story, I knew that he had to drop out of the race. And so I'm sorry if there are any women in the audience that feel that I failed them. I take that super seriously. I carry that with me. And I'm sorry. So, I still maintain that what was said in the New York Times was not disqualifying, but what is alleged here just absolutely is. And the not that it should matter given what the details were and what the corroboration is, but this individual, this woman who is accusing him, supports his politics, and that is why she was reticent to come forward in the first place. And I'm sorry if myself or anybody, I'm sorry if I contributed to that culture.
Just a little heads up if you ever want to try to apologize in a way that at least seems sincere. I'm sorry is great. I'm sorry if is not great. Yes, Emma, you did contribute to the culture that made it extremely difficult for a rape victim to come forward with her story. You got on camera and confidently told more than 2 million subscribers that a woman alleging domestic abuse by Graham Platner was a lying paid shill. You and Sam Cedar and Kyle Kulinski and Mehdi Hassan and Ryan Grimm have spent the last 6 months mocking every criticism of Platner as an Israeli disinformation conspiracy, warning that the only people who could possibly come forward with negative information are doing so to stop a progressive Democrat from getting into office. You inspired an army of viewers to spread the word, telling people who criticize Platner that we must want Republicans or centrist Democrats to win because Platner is the only progressive in the race. Let me remove that if for you, Emma. Yes, you are the reason that Rebeccawatson did not want to come forward. You are the reason why she eventually had to come forward. And that should disgust you as much as it disgusts me. And all of you need to grapple with the fact that if Jenny Rebeccawatson had been a conservative, or if she hadn't told a friend what happened, or any list of a number of other reasons why she wasn't a perfect victim, you would still be here calling her a lying bitch. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.